Here for graciously co-sponsoring our speaker tonight, but also our other UConn affiliates, the Thomas J. Dodd Research Center, Human Rights Institute, Community Outreach, Human Rights in Action Learning Community, the UConn Humanities Institute, Teacher Education, EDCI, Equity and Social Justice Committee, all of which are co-sponsors for Mr. Cooper's appearance here at UConn and also speaking to you this evening. So let me tell you a little bit about Richard Cooper before I turn the stage over to him. He is the Director of Museum Experiences for the National Underground Railroad Freedom Center in Cincinnati, Ohio. That institution opened to the public in 2004 and has a mission to encourage individuals to take courageous steps for freedom today. In fulfilling this mission, Mr. Cooper manages 7 major components of the institution: collections, education, exhibits, interpretation, community outreach, modern-day slavery initiatives and programming. Richard came to the Freedom Center in the capacity of the Interpretive Services Coordinator, where he was in charge of maintaining the day-to-day operations of the Interpretive Services program within the museum's 150,000 square foot facility. He is a dedicated educator and strives to promote a culture of diversity and inclusion. He is also the co-author and author of multiple pieces on interpreting slavery and the Underground Railroad. His recent co-authored book is Cincinnati's Underground Railroad. Mr. Cooper is also an adjunct professor at Northern Kentucky University. He received his bachelor's in American history from the University of Cincinnati and his master's degree in public history from Northern Kentucky University. And so without further ado, I would like to introduce Richard Cooper.
Hello. Thank you for that introduction, and thank you for everyone that sponsored my opportunity to come here and talk with you guys this evening. I have the great privilege of working, as I'll say, at the best institution in the country. I work at this beautiful building that is behind you. It's 157,000 square feet, 5 floors made up of 3 separate buildings. It represents, if you look at the architecture of the building, it represents pieces of and stories of the Underground Railroad, from the waving of the building to represent the Ohio River, which became known as the River Jordan, where enslaved people 150 years ago courageously took the steps of freedom of crossing that river. There's these smooth pillars that we have on this side of the building, and they're rough on the outside of the building, that represent that the journey was smooth along the way at times, but it was rough most of the time. You'll see a spire case that goes all the way up inside the building, talking about the cooperation that worked across the Ohio River. So it's a magnificent building. We have exhibition spaces on our 2nd and 3rd floors. Our 4th floor is where our collection spaces are. We also have a genealogy family research center where people can come in and trace their ancestry. So that's free and open to the public at all times. We see roughly 150,000 visitors a year, but we work with about 1 million kids through distance learning programs every year, and about 400,000 people that visit our digital resources online each year. So I'll kind of walk through that. So what I'm going to start with is a general kind of overview of the Freedom Center, and then I'm going to do a deep dive into all the video pieces that we do, the technology pieces we do, and any questions you guys might have along the way. So our mission is to reveal stories about freedom heroes, from the era of the Underground Railroad to contemporary times, challenging and inspiring people to take courageous steps for freedom today. So it's a very ambitious mission, but we're really trying to make modern day freedom fighters using the legacies of the Underground Railroad to inspire them to take those courageous steps for freedom today. We opened to the public in 2004 was the grand opening of the building, but we actually started as an organization all the way back in 1995. We have grown as an institution We've had our ups and downs, as every museum has. We opened at a very interesting time. The economy crashed right after we opened, which definitely hurt us as an institution. We went from 110 employees all the way down to about, I think we got down to about 18 at one time. Now we're back up to around 40 to 50 employees, so we're gradually growing back up the institution. We've also grown our endowment, which is a major player in museums, is an endowment. So we're now at about $12 million. This is showing the 2005 or 2015 figure. We stand as a cornerstone for conscious. We're a museum, a conscious museum. We look at a word that most people always look at me and say, what does that mean? Inclusive freedom. It is a big word that we use. And what we mean by inclusive freedom is we're looking at building a society that is inclusive for everyone, and everyone can experience freedom in their own way and in the same way as someone else. So if I own a Porsche, you have the ability to own a Porsche. If I have a PhD, you have the ability to get a PhD. So we're really trying to create an inclusive society for everyone. What we do for freedom is we combat discrimination and inequality. We connect lessons of the past and the present. We educate and engage the public. We support modern day abolitionists. We lift a voice for oppressed people, and we impact the national conversation. Some of the key things here is in 2012, we started a new process of engaging our community and communities around the nation around difficult conversations. Some of those different conversations really revolved around issues of violence, specifically gun violence. We attacked that head on. We started to attack disparities in our community, from housing to education to poverty to healthcare. The list can go on and on. We also started to have conversations around confronting major national issues like the Islamic faith. We did a program just recently called Fear to Freedom, Confronting Islamophobia. And we brought Islamic scholars and people that were speaking out against the Islamic community for everything that's going on around the nation, and had a very detailed conversation about what is going on around the nation. We also had a conversation with the recent shooting at the University of Cincinnati campus, with the police officer shooting the young man off campus. We brought, in that conversation, we actually brought the family's attorney of the young man that was shot, the police officer's attorney, and we actually brought every single media person in Cincinnati on the panel, which I never recommend having a 15-person panel, but it actually worked out. And what we did, the question we looked at was, how did the media respond to the shooting? What did we do right, and what did we do wrong? It was a very powerful conversation. We had about 300 people there. Obviously, it was very difficult because we brought both attorneys, we brought all the media, but then we also brought people from the county, we brought people from the city, and we brought people from the prosecutor's office, which this is going to be a major court case that starts in October of this year. And we did this in November of last year, trying to bring everyone around the table to have a conversation about this. How we do what we do, I kind of talked a little bit about that through diverse programming. We also have dynamic exhibitions. When I took over so I've been at the Freedom Center now, I'm going into my 13th year. When I took over as the Director of Museum Experiences, we were doing amazing exhibits, but we really kind of started to take the turn and say, okay, how can we really change the way our community sees the center as a place where they can come and have safe dialogue, but also where we're attacking issues that are facing our community. So the first exhibition that I signed off on was Kin Killin' Kin. Kin Killin' Kin is an exhibition by James Pate, who is an African-American artist out of Dayton, Ohio. And he grew up in Cincinnati and Avondale. And he kept hearing, when he was going to the barber shop and in the community, about all the deaths in the community. And he kept hearing this saying in the community that we're putting the Klan out of business. So what he did is he took the issue of violence in the community head on. not necessarily looking at black on black violence, but that's kind of, it did look at that in the larger sense, but he was looking at why it was taking place and how history was being lost. So he took charcoal and he drew images of the civil rights movement in the background. He drew images of African American history in the background. But then he took images of African Americans, put them in Klan clothing, put guns in their hand, and showing them killing other African Americans on the streets of Cincinnati. Very powerful exhibition. It opened us up to talking about violence. It opened us up to bringing in the YWCA and having a conversation about how violence affects young women and young children in the home. It allowed us to have a youth summit where we allowed youth to come in and talk about the violence that they see in their communities every day. We brought in gun experts and allowed them to talk about gun violence across the country. So it was very dynamic in many ways of what that exhibition did for us as a center. Here's some other examples. You kind of see here, here's an example of the Kin Killing Kin piece here. We've also done an exhibit that is actually just closed called Enslaved, which is by Lisa Christine. If you've never seen her artwork, I highly encourage you to search Lisa Christine and pull up some of her artwork. She's one of the most powerful photographers I've ever seen. She has a way to capture people's eyes that just pull you directly into the picture. We also did an exhibit on diversity in baseball. We partnered with Major League Baseball and had looked at diversity in baseball throughout the years from all different religions and faiths and ethnicities. Interesting thing about this is when the All-Star game was in Cincinnati last year, and the African American community, because of the disparities and all the shootings that were taking place in Cincinnati, we hear a lot about Chicago on the news and how Chicago's there's a lot of violence going on in Chicago. Well, what we don't understand is this is going on in every community. From January of last year till June of last summer, Cincinnati had over 400 shootings in the city of Cincinnati. It was one of the bloodiest summers in Cincinnati history. And the African American churches were getting ready to protest. So the Cincinnati Reds called us and said, hey, can you help us do something so we don't have a major protest on national television during the All-Star game? So what we did is we called all of the African American churches in the community, brought all the church leaders together, and we held a huge symposium on the disparities facing the African American community. Major League Baseball taped it, and it is now on MLB Network. You can still watch it. If you go to MLB's website, you can watch this video. It's still their #1 watched video that they've ever put up on MLB Network. It's about a 2-hour video, but it's very powerful. It kind of talks about the disparities that are facing the Cincinnati community, but also talks about the disparities facing the larger nation as a whole. So those are just some of our exhibitions. Some of the coolest ones that I've been involved with, I've enjoyed working on all of them, but I've actually, this last year we had the 13th Amendment Emancipation Proclamation at the Freedom Center, and get to hold those in your hand. That's something you don't normally get to do on a daily basis. So to get to hold those were really cool. Enslaved was our recent one. Here's some of the images here. These bricks are some of the most powerful images of children that are 9, 10 years old that are forced to carry bricks 14, 16 feet high. Our president of the Freedom Center, Dr. Newsom, is about 6'6", was the first African American football player to play for Duke University, still on the Duke University board. Talks about when he was growing up during the 1960s, during the Civil Rights Movement, as one of his jobs, he actually worked at a brick mill in North Carolina, and he used to have to lift bricks and then throw them up onto the next level of bricks that they're showing here. And he said the most he could ever do was about 7 or 8 at a time. And these 9 and 10-year-olds are carrying 14, 15, 16 bricks on their head at a time. Some of the other stuff we do, this is part of the Kin Killing Kin exhibition. This is actually in our gallery space here. We did a national anthem sing-along, which has been with everything that's going on with the national anthem now. We actually did this program again on Friday of last week. We actually had 1,700 kids take place in that. We did talk about the right to protest and the history of it, so it was very powerful for students to get to see that. We have youth docent programs where we have about 25 to 100 youth a year that join us in a 13-month program where they actually become tour guides, and then they actually go out and do think tanks for other youth in the community. Here's just pictures of school buses. This is obviously our marketing development website or PowerPoint, so you can kind of see they're trying to sell that we have a whole bunch of school groups that visit each year. Some of the other stuff we do national and local dialogues. We have a Freedom Summit where we bring all the Christian leaders and faith leaders from around the world to have a summit every year in May in Cincinnati on modern day slavery. We work with the U.S. State Department, which I'll actually show a website here in a minute. We created a film called Journey to Freedom, which I'll talk about here in a minute. This is just some of the websites that we run. The freedomcenter.org are In Slavery Now, and then we actually run the tipheroes.org website, which is through the U.S. State Department. So I'll talk about all of those here in a minute. This is just some of our infographics of people that have visited some of our websites, specifically our In Slavery Now website. So it talks about, and then some of our special exhibition numbers that you can kind of see here. We also have an International Freedom Conductor Award that we give every 2 years. Our first recipient was Rosa Parks in 1998. She actually came to the Freedom Center and accepted that award. It was amazing to get to see her in Cincinnati. We are actually creating, which I'll talk about it here in a moment, a new experience around her, a new VR experience where you actually get to become Rosa Parks on the bus. So we'll talk about what that looks like. And then what our last person that we actually gave the award to was Nelson Mandela. Here's some of the images here. This is Nelson Mandela's great-grandson. This is the president of the Nelson Mandela Family Foundation. And then these are some of our partners that we work with. We are an accredited museum. There's about 17,500 museums inside the United States. Less than like 3 or 5% of them are accredited museums, meaning we're accredited through the American Alliance of Museums. We're a member of Sites of Conscience. We are partners with Historians Against Slavery, Google, Discovery Education. We do a lot with Yale University. I would like to have UConn up there here soon. These are some of our national partners that we work with, so you can kind of see we do a lot of work with national partners around the country. We work a lot with Procter & Gamble. They're based in Cincinnati, Deloitte, and some Toyota we do a lot with. Here's, people always ask about budget. Here's kind of the operating budget of the Freedom Center. So in 2016, this was last fiscal year, so we go June to July. Our revenues were $4.8 million. Our operating expense was $4.5 million. This year it's going to go up. Our expenses will be about $5 million. Our revenues will be about $5.5 million. And I can break that down if anybody has any questions about how we do that. And then this just kind of talks about, we're obviously moving towards the future, seeing new things that we can do, new opportunities that we can take around the country, and how we can get connected with different audiences. Any questions about general Freedom Center stuff? Any questions about that? Yes, sir.
Do you have research collections?
We do.
Archives and library?
We do. So we have, our library was actually at the Cincinnati Public Library up until, it'll be there until November, and we're actually bringing it back in. We're building a whole new space on our first floor for researchers and scholars to come in. Some of our collections include, we have one of the oldest African American church records inside the United States, the Union Baptist Church records, which dates to 1831. Some of the people that were involved with that were some of the enslaved people that were owned by Thomas Jefferson. So it's a phenomenal collection, all the way up to slave ads, runaway ads, newspapers of the period. We have copies of the 13th Amendment Emancipation Proclamation in our collection. A ton. We have almost all the plantation records that are known to be out there in our collections or copies of them. We have the Wilbur Siebert collection, which is also at the Ohio Historical Society. So we have just a number of different collections that are there. Some of those are going online, so we're actually digitizing a lot of that right now. So the Union Baptist church records are being transcribed, and we're actually putting them up online here very soon. So, good question. Any other questions? All right. So what I want to do now is I kind of want to dive into what we kind of do in the digital side of things with technologies and stuff. A lot of pieces that we do is we have a whole team that is dedicated to our digital side of what we do that works very closely with my team. Some of the things they create are obviously videos. So I'm just going to show a small video of a video that we created for school groups when we go out to invite them to come to the center.
All right, class. 2 days ago, we took a field trip to the National Underground Railroad Freedom Center. Your assignment was to write a report on what you saw and how it affected you. Now, who wants to go first? Oh, wow. Okay, Brett, you're up.
On the banks of the Ohio River stands the National Underground Railroad Freedom Center. Just as the flame in its logo burns, it shines as a beacon for us today. The same way a lamp in the window showed the enslaved the way to safety.
The Underground Railroad was not a subway train, but a network of people, both black and white, dedicated to fulfilling humanity's promise that all people have the right to live their lives free of chains.
The abolitionists who risked their lives for freedom were so good at moving the enslaved from the south to the north that the slave hunters said it was like they were riding on an underground railroad. The name stuck and lives on to this day.
The conductors on the Underground Railroad represented the best of what America stood for. Through their courage, cooperation, and perseverance, they fought a government-sanctioned system of tyranny for people who have been kidnapped from their homeland.
The National Underground Railroad Freedom Center showed me that whether you're from Spain, India, or Berlin, you have a responsibility to ensure that everybody should be free.
I've read in history books about the Berlin Wall being torn down and the German people being free for the first time to cross the border, but to see a piece of it at the Freedom Center and to learn how it ties in with the enslaved breaking their chains was very moving.
I love to read, but no book has made the experience of America's triumph over slavery so real. As I walked through the exhibits or viewed the amazing, powerful films and animations in theaters, I was reminded of what Dr. King said, that everybody can be great because everybody can serve humanity.
The Freedom Center opened my eyes to the fact that slavery still exists today. The permanent exhibit, Invisible, shows how many children my age and even younger are bought, sold, shipped all around the world and made to do some of the worst things imaginable.
So I'm gonna pause. I won't make you watch the whole video, but you kind of get an idea. So we rely a lot on our video teams to create videos just like this for us. We film all of our speaker presentations. A lot of those end up online. We put a lot of those in our development videos. We use some of those we do a lot with Discovery Education, and they have a website where we actually will put a lot of the information up online for teachers to use across the country. But we also we have a whole historical team that works with our digital team to create kind of animated tours for students in the classroom. We also create webisodes, which I will send a link to everyone so you can we'll be able to send it out so you can actually watch one of our webisodes where we went in and animated a whole story of Harriet Tubman. We went in and animated a story of a local Cincinnatian named John Parker. So we're working with digital people all the time. We're also working with them to create tours pieces for us. So we have a mobile app that we use where people, when they come into the museum, they can download this app where they can rent out one of our iPods and take a digital tour. Most museums have something like this. We actually just moved to a company named Story. It's STQ-RY, so it's like with a magnifying glass is the way they look. They're fairly cheaper than some of the other companies out there. They're about $1,000 to use this. The Smithsonian uses Story now to tell their stories. But what we did is we uploaded some of our videos with our digital team. So this is one example of a video.
I watch a baby torn from its mother's arms. I am here in the middle, head in my hands, trying to find strength. Property's all I am to these slave traders. That man in his wide straw hat, I hear his name's Anderson. Well, he won't ever own my spirit. No one will, as long as there's breath left in me. Now, I want you to do something. Close your eyes. Think about the person you love the most in your life. Maybe it's a parent, your best friend. See them in your mind. Now imagine chains locking around their ankles, around their wrists, an iron collar around their neck. Imagine them dragged away. And you realize you will never see them again. What do you feel? Maybe you can't watch. Maybe you just scream. Maybe you try to break the chains around you, but the iron just cuts your flesh. Doesn't really matter what you do though, does it? It makes no difference, 'cause they ain't coming back.
So that just gives you an idea of the type of videos, from our promotional videos that to make to our historical images or videos that we make. We do a lot of short films like this with our modern day slavery team, where we will go live and talk about issues that are facing human trafficking around the world today. That team is made up, so our modern day slavery side of my department is made up of a coordinator that oversees the stories that we tell. We also have a researcher that's there that does all the research for all the stories that we engage with, and then we have a graphic design person that actually updates the website and creates all the content that we put on our website that I'll show you here in a minute. That team travels all around the world. We're based in Cincinnati, but that team actually just got back from Asia, where they were collecting stories for the U.S. State Department for their trafficking in persons website, which we actually oversee. So this is through the U.S. State Department, tipheroes.org, where our digital team creates this website, creates all of the stories that go on this website, and then the design layout of everything that goes here. So you can go through by region and select each person. And we're still going back over the last 10 years and collecting these people's names. So this person's from 2004. So we will actually travel to Greece here soon to actually record her story and actually put her whole story here with the U.S. State Department online. So that's a major sector of what they do. We also have the other website that they run is the In Slavery Now website, which they're responsible for all the digital design, all the images that go here. What the interesting thing about this website and what they do is this ACT section. They go in and they have stories, but there are 104 actions that we have on here now that you can take to get involved in the fight for freedom today. So this is really driving at our mission. We also have an action library where you can learn about those different things. We talk about buying things that are not made of slave labor. We talk about job opportunities that are in this field. We also talk about how you can volunteer. So you can actually go to volunteer. You can type in your zip code, where you're from, and it will pop up with organizations that are here in Connecticut, all the way to every state in the United States and around the world that you can actually volunteer with and get involved in the fight for freedom today. We vet all these organizations to get put on our website. The organization actually has to apply to be put onto this website. Our team fully vets them with the U.S. State Department to make sure that they can go on here. Another big piece that we encourage to do is to donate money to these organizations. So we make sure that we're sending money to a correct organization. So all that back end is created by this team. We also have a web development team at the Freedom Center that helps us create all this content. So we have multiple teams that are doing our digital side just for our websites. That's a team of about 5 people that we have that are directly related to this, outside of those 3 people that give the content for this area and help tell the stories that we tell. Another big sector that we have is our AVIT teams that help specifically with my department in exhibitions. Exhibitions, we are always looking for new ways to bring the stories to life. One of the struggles I face is somebody from the AVIT team will come in and say, hey, I have this great new technology that I want you to use, but they have no understanding of how we will use it. They just bring it to me and say, hey, this is this new projector. And the first thing I ask them is, it's not about the technology, it's about the story behind the technology that's going to make it come to life for us. So all the videos that we create, we make sure we build the best content, and then that will make the technology work for us inside the Freedom Center. So the new technology that we're using is the new VRs that Samsung has. We're also working with Oculus Rift and Facebook with their new VR pieces. What we're going to do with theirs, we're going to pick key times in history to bring stories to life for students. We did a lot of testing with high school students across the country on the stories that we should tell. The first one that came about was Rosa Parks. So we worked with a company called Mobius to actually create a full 3D video virtual reality experience on Rosa Parks that day on the bus. And what they did is they went back and they pulled all the historical record. They pulled everyone's testimonies from that day, and they built her whole story that day on the bus. So what happens is you step on a facade of a bus, and when you step on the facade of the bus, there are bus seats that are from the time period. You sit down on those bus seats, and they actually begin to vibrate like the bus is idling. Then we tell you a little story about Rosa Parks. Then you will get a headset, and you actually put the headset on, and you become Rosa Parks that day on the bus. You are hearing what she was thinking as the bus driver comes to her and tells her to get out of her bus seat. You see when the police officers come up on the bus. And the cool thing, if you've never done VR, when you look at it, you can actually get up and you're looking all around, and you're seeing the people that were looking up at the bus that day. And you see their facial expressions. You see the other people sitting on the bus and their facial expressions. You turn back and you see the other African Americans that were on the bus that day. And some got up and left. They got off the bus. When the bus stopped, they actually got up and left off the bus. But you see some others kind of encouraging her to stay in her seat that day. When we first tested it, my boss, who's the executive vice president of the Freedom Center, he's the former U.S. ambassador to the African Union, which is always fun going in and talking every day to a former U.S. ambassador, knowing like 2 years ago I'd have never been able to get close to him. So it's interesting going and working with him. But when he first took it, and the bus driver actually gets up and approaches Rosa Parks, there's a video of him, and he literally, I wish I had it here, we were trying to get him to send it to us. He literally puts his fist up like he's getting ready to punch the bus driver, because it feels like you're right there as this bus driver is approaching him. And the reactions from high school students in saying that, is every museum like this? and to hear things like that. And so we're very excited about that, what that will offer for us as we move forward. Some of the other ones we're looking at recreating is the March on Washington. So putting people right in the middle of the March on Washington. We're also looking at creating, we have a slave pen that was moved from Maysville, Kentucky to Cincinnati. Maysville is about 70 miles away from Cincinnati. The slave pen was built sometime around 1830. It was a pen that held enslaved people for a period of time. So they were bought from the Kentucky area, put in this pen, and then they were moved from that pen to Natchez, Mississippi. Now, to get from Kentucky to Natchez, Mississippi, that's about a 750-mile walk. You'd walk 20 to 25 miles a day for 40 to 60 straight days. It may be snowing, it may be 100 degrees outside, and you were still walking chained to the person in front of you. You had to carry everything with you. So we're looking at recreating what it would have been like to be inside that slave pen in the 1830s. Now that one's a little trickier because you have to be culturally sensitive to people that were kept in that building. We're actually working with the great-great-granddaughter of a young lady that was, her grandmother was held inside that building. And she is now a PhD and runs a museum in Chicago, and she's helping us create that story of what that will look like. So we're looking at how we will interpret that type of story inside the building. We also, our building is very high tech. We are actually just putting in a new digital board and theater into our building. So we're putting in a, I'm not going to say the term right, but an 8K projector. It goes up to 8K, where we will be able to run high definition videos. We're about 12 years old, and museum technologies are starting to wear out. And one of the biggest challenges that we face as an institution is I apologize. The University of Cincinnati's calling me about a donation. Anytime 556 rings, that's a donation from UC. So when you graduate from Connecticut, you're going to get those calls about 2 weeks after you graduate. We're about 12 years old with a lot of our technology, and it's starting to fade out. And that is the biggest challenge we face, is how do we upgrade our technology at a reasonable cost, but still stay as a very technology-based building. We are moving to a base where we can run everything through iPads or a tablet, so I can turn anything on and off inside the building. Right now, a lot of our players are dying out, and they're about $5,000 or $6,000 at a pop when they die out, which for a museum and a nonprofit, that creates a lot of dilemmas. So how do we cost effectively make sure that we're relevant for the next couple of years and not have to continuously change out those players as we move forward? But that's a little bit about what we do, but let me open it back up to questions. Is there any questions in general? Yes?
How do you envision engaging with UConn?
That is actually why I'm here. We're looking at ways we can engage more with UConn. We're looking at how we can tell UConn students more about the jobs we have at the Freedom Center. Right now we have a couple of jobs on our website at freedomcenter.org. We have our In Slavery Now coordinator position is up, our researcher position is up, and our In Slavery Now manager position is up. So we're actually hiring new people for this department right now to help us take this into the future. So there's those types of jobs out there. We're looking at ways we can bring students into internship with us and do fellowships with us in Cincinnati. We're looking at ways where students can do work here at UConn, and that information can be used back in Cincinnati. So we're definitely looking for ways to engage UConn students. Other questions?
Yeah, particularly students in the room who maybe haven't thought about the ways in which you as an animator, a different type of artist, as a digital marketing strategist, please use this opportunity to ask about what types of things people in your area of interest might do or how they work together. I'd really like to give you a chance to ask. I've got lots of questions, but you come first.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll say this is, most people don't think of the museum field, but there's so many different career opportunities in the museum field all across the country for all kinds of different majors. I mean, we work with engineers all the time. I work with architecture majors. I mean, when we build exhibits, we're working with people laying out the whole exhibition space for us. So we work with all kinds of artists, engineers. We're working with Harvard University right now, and there's psychologists and other people around an exhibit that we're developing around implicit bias, which science is way over my head. So we're bringing all kinds of experts into the field. But what kind of questions do you guys have? Yes.
How do you go about setting up an exhibition in the building? Do you have a specific artist in mind that you reach out to and commission new work, or are they already doing the work that you're looking for?
It depends. Sometimes we look for new artists to develop an idea. That may be from all kinds of different genres and backgrounds as artists. But we actually have a creative director at the Freedom Center that will reach out to artists all across the country. We'll put out a call for proposals. We'll ask artists to submit some artwork, and then we'll hire those artists based on the project. So, good question. Any other questions? Man, that's either really good or really bad.
Did you have another question?
No.
So I failed to introduce myself at the beginning. I'm Professor Clarissa Seguilio. I'm Assistant Professor of Digital Humanities here at the Digital Media and Design Department. So that's who was yakking at you at the beginning. My question, as we move into virtual reality and experiences that are what we call in digital humanities and other scholarly corners of the world embodied. I'm not just watching, but I'm feeling with my senses things moving, and the reality of the experience is heightened to the point in the example that you gave of someone's coming at me, I must defend myself. How do you navigate between the issues, number one, of trauma? I've experienced, some of you know about the famous lunch counter protests during the civil rights era movement down at a center in Atlanta, right? So just with a headset and not even seeing, but just hearing in three-dimensional sound, you feel as though someone is walking around you, insulting you. And it's a very traumatizing, particularly depending on what someone brings to the center as their background and their heritage. So how do you navigate issues of trauma because of the heightened sensory realism is one question. The second question is, these technologies are intended to have us empathize and relate with historic actors. But there's also problems of embodiment where I walk away and I say, that's just what Rosa Parks felt like after I've had maybe a 3-minute experience of feeling vulnerable and discriminated against. And for myself as an Irish European woman who hasn't experienced a lifetime that Rosa Parks experienced under Jim Crow segregation, how do we also navigate kind of empathy, but then the boundaries of empathy where there's kind of a false, oh, okay, I get it, that's what that's like.
Yeah, great.
Those complex questions.
Great question. So for the first one, it's all about preparation and what happens afterwards. So there is a significant amount of prep before somebody puts on that device and telling you the story of and what they're getting ready to experience. Afterwards, everyone that goes to the Freedom Center has, and we highly encourage this, some do, some don't. We do it with all school groups, a dialogue where we decompress everything they experienced. Yes, you're in that moment, but when you step in the slave pen, we have had people pass out on the floor inside the slave pen. we've had people completely break down emotionally inside the Freedom Center. We had an exhibit on Without Sanctuary, which are lynching photographs in America. And we did it, we completely changed it. It had traveled a couple years earlier. We looked at how it was done. We decided we wanted to put a little more context behind it. So we put a lot more context behind it. We put a lot more newspapers of the time period. And on the first weekend that it opened, there was an African-American male that was probably in his 40s or 50s, was in the exhibition. It was snowing really, really bad that day. And I kept traveling through the exhibition to check on him because we always have people going through the galleries just to check up on things. About 2 hours later, he came out of the gallery space. He was about as far as the camera is away from me now. You could see tears running down his face. He collected himself. He walked up and he said, "My grandfather fought in World War II, and he made it home. But he never made it back to Cincinnati. His image is in there inside the gallery." We put people, and there was no words. Mark, who brought me here to Connecticut and connected me with everyone, knows that, as you can tell, I like to talk. There were no words. And we put people in these situations and moments every time you walk into the museum. We handle these difficult subjects. And people are put into that moment at every moment. And it is not easy. But we take our docent corps through a year training program, sometimes up to a 1.5 year training program, where we bring in psychologists and people that specialize in dialogue training and walk them through a full experience of what's going to happen, and take them through a training, which we can never be perfect. We do with the Xavier representatives that we work with. If there's a major problem, we will actually call them into that situation. But we do a fairly good job of debriefing with people and helping them understand what they just experienced. There's not an easy answer there. When you put people into that, and that's why we chose things like Rosa Parks. That's why we're choosing things like the March on Washington. That's why I have really paused on, do we do the slave pin or do we not do the slave pin? Because you open up that door. We've always walked on a fine line of we're either the white guilt museum, or for the African American community, maybe we go too far and we need to move away from telling the story of slavery and talk about all the accomplishments of African Americans. So we kind of play on a fine line of how far we go with the topic. But we do a very good job of debriefing our audiences when they come through and allowing them to share. We don't force anything onto anyone. By the time you take the Rosa Parks experience, you've been through a number of our galleries where we're preparing you for that experience. I've done the lunch counter experience at the Center for Human and Civil Rights in Atlanta. It's like that. I mean, it puts you in that moment. Can we ever put someone into what Rosa Parks experienced in 2.5 minutes? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. But can we give people a glimpse of what happened at that moment through VR? From what we have seen and what we've learned from it, people are taking a lot out of it, and we're allowing them right away to debrief after that experience. And it's not it's very difficult training people to go into a conversation after something like that, especially because when I go to a museum and I go through a tour and somebody says I have to debrief and there's somebody that I've never met and you want me to open up and tell you my life story, it's tough. But we do a fairly good job of getting people to open up and to share their experiences. We try to make sure that everyone that comes into the building has an opportunity to talk to one of our tour guides or one of our staff members on the floor of the museum. But I have not put a good answer around that one yet. And I'm still working through that. That's why we're just doing the Rosa Parks to start out, and we're going to continue to collect data to see where we need to go with our audiences. But that is something that we have struggled with. That is something that we have talked to a lot of scholars across the country on, is how do we answer that question. We don't want people to walk away thinking, okay, now I've walked in Rosa Parks' shoes. So we're really working on that. We are working with Harvard at looking at experiences that are a little longer, where you do step in somebody else's shoes. There's a big piece out there around implicit bias of not understanding what other people experience. Simple as, what is an experience of an African American getting on a bus compared to a white person getting on a bus? What if I, as a white person, get on a bus and decide not to pay? Am I going to be looked at more compared to what an African American experiences when they get on a bus and don't pay? That's something that the city of Cincinnati, we're working with them right now, because we just launched a new streetcar system in Cincinnati, and you don't swipe a card, you just buy a ticket, and then there'll be an attendant that will walk down and randomly check who has a ticket and who doesn't have a ticket. So we're actually tracking how many times they go up to a white person compared to how many times they go up to somebody that is from a diverse background. So we're actually tracking that and talking to the city of Cincinnati about how that creates more problems for minority communities than it will for the white community. So I hope that answers. It's not an easy.
I didn't expect
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
any answer
Go
if
ahead.
there's issues.
Well, I will say, having been there, and I don't know the background, because it's the first time I'm learning about the Rosa Parks experience, but I know in many of your exhibits that have film or that are in any way sort of interactive, that there's you don't call them a trigger warning there, but you give sort of the what's coming, and also if you need to leave or move out at any time, here's the way to do that. I'm assuming that that's going to be
that will be there with staff
part of the Rosa Parks experience as well, and any other virtual reality that's coming. But is there anything on the back end of that, as I was thinking about her question, where it's not all on the museum to call in? If people have sort of opted into that experience, knowing what could be coming, what could be triggering around, these are the sort of organizations that we partner with to continue to process that. I know that you run ongoing dialogues and fora for people to continue that conversation and to meet others in the area to continue it, but has there been any talk around having that?
We did that with Without Sanctuary, and I have not thought about that for the VR experience, where people, after they left, if they needed to reconnect with others in organizations in the community that they could reach out to. So that is something that I'm definitely going to think about and talk to my staff about. In every experience, we do offer, where we prep people for what they're getting ready to experience, we also offer ways where they can step away from the experience. So when we did Without Sanctuary, we actually had a room in the middle that you could actually exit the exhibit, or it was just kind of like a place where you could collect your thoughts. And there was tissues, and there were staff members in there from Xavier that were PhD candidates that were there to talk to people and help them debrief throughout that whole experience. So we do offer ways for people to step away if they need to, because you do have, with the person that experienced it and said that his grandfather was in the exhibition, there is a moment every day where I'll say I get punched in the stomach. I normally have learned to, when I go to museums now, when I first started the Freedom Center, I was trying to go to every plantation, every site that was involved in slavery as I was gaining my knowledge at the museum. Now when I go, I try to avoid those sites. I will still go, but I try to avoid those sites because it's so, when you do it every single day, you learn how to shut it off at certain times. So by the time I studied every lynching photograph, and I can tell you the names, I can tell you the information, and I can tell you every detail about those photographs. Close my eyes and I can still do it to this day, and it was 6 years ago. But by the time the exhibition left, I could go into the gallery, interpret the gallery, and never even look at the images. Because I trained my brain not to look at the images. And that's the difficult part of working in an institution like ours. But that's not the whole story of what the Freedom Center is about. Like when I go into the slave pen, you see positive images of how families were rebuilt, how people survived this struggle and continued to fight, and how we got to today and the struggles that we still face. But there's also very powerful stories in here, and that's what keeps me going back every single day. Other questions? Go ahead.
A quick question.
Yeah.
I can't wait to go to your museum.
Yeah.
It sounds amazing, but a lot of people won't get a chance to go to Cincinnati.
True.
So do you, and you have a ton of content. What are ways that you guys are kind of thinking about kind of distributing that content? So like you get 140,000 people in your museum, but you can reach 2 million people around the country. What are you doing in that area?
So we have obviously normal stuff I'll go through. We have YouTube sites where we put a lot of our videos up. We do Google Hangouts where we do national chats probably once a quarter right now. We're actually, now that those are growing, we're starting to do more. And with those Google Hangouts and chats, we're linking NGOs and victims of human trafficking from around the world. They all log in, and we have about 6 panelists, and then people from the outside can log in and be a part of that conversation. We're doing a lot more on our website where if we have a major speaker in, we're broadcasting that out. We're working through Discovery Education to do more stuff through theirs to get more of our content out. We are looking at creating a new educational portal where educators can become part of this portal. Each month we would have a scholar or historian, an NGO that would log in and have a conversation with the teachers in the classroom and their students. It's an area that the distance learning area is somewhere where we're just, because we're 10 years old, we're just scratching the surface. And it's somewhere where I'm hoping to go over the next 3 to 4 years. We were actually talking today with some other members of the UConn staff about ways that we may connect with UConn to create a program for educators across the country and students across the country, and using portals and other things. So we're just starting to dive into that area deeply, but we do have things through Discovery. We have things through Google Hangouts. We use all of our websites to tell our stories, but we're just scratching the surface there. So,
Rich, you brought up Story earlier.
Yep, that's
that
another
app.
Yep.
How are people engaging with that? Are they doing it strictly through, I have the app, so I'm going to go to Freedom Center and get some of the stories from that? Or
yeah, so that happens. So Story is, it's based out of, they're out of Seattle here inside the United States. But if you go to Who's on Story, what happens is when you download their app, anywhere you're at, you'll actually be able to, by zip code, it'll pull up where you're at, GPS, it'll pull up every story that's around you. They have a ton of museums that are involved, a good amount from Seattle because that's where they're based. But the Smithsonian is also on here. So if you start to explore, it'll start to pull up all of their sites that you can download. You can also, so if say a classroom can't visit, they can pull up the Freedom Center's stories, and they can actually do a virtual tour from anywhere in the United States. We also, with this technology, what we have inside the Freedom Center is we have beacons. So when you're traveling through the Freedom Center, instead of having to continue to push up, it just pops up on your phone now, which our older visitors love. So they walk into our slave pen and all the videos pop up. And we can do all kinds of games with and scavenger hunts through this app. But this has a number of museums around the world that are involved with Story that you can actually just go and take tours of every single building. You don't actually have to be at their site.
We have one last official question from the floor, and then I'm mindful that for those who knew that this event was running from 5:30 to 6:30, that if you need to make an exit that you can, but the degree to which Richard is available for any, after we officially break up, any follow-up questions, or maybe you want to get in touch with him at a future point with questions, we can certainly do that. So for our last official question from the floor.
I really enjoyed your presentation.
Thank you.
As like more people have like your headsets at home, like the Oculus or Samsung VR, do you think you're going to publish some of your experiences online?
We will absolutely be doing that. So we're working with Samsung right now to do that. We're working with Toyota to create some other stuff that we do with high school students around the country. So we will definitely be publishing some of these online very soon.
Okay.
So it'll obviously be paid content, just because I am a nonprofit and we look for ways to drive revenue. So it would be paid content through that, but we are definitely looking at that. So, and if this goes where we think, we'll hopefully be able to hire a whole team that will come in and help us create these videos as we move forward.
Well, I'd like, if we could all please thank Richard Cooper for his talk.